Dr. Devdutt Changadkar, CEO, Saraswati Infotech Private Limited. Now, in last two sessions, I have talked about credit risk, market risk and operational risk. Today, I would be talking about the investment portfolio that the banks are holding. Now, in this investment portfolio, in the first session, I would try to cover the structure, and in the second session, I would try to cover all the products which we have been dealing with. So, let us start with the investment portfolio in banks, particularly cooperative banks, and its structure. I would start my presentation with display of the policy rates. What are those policy rates? These are the rates as well as various ratios, and by taking note of these rates and ratios, we will deal in detail the investment portfolio. Cash reserve ratio is constant at 4%. Statutory liquidity ratio, 1 year before it was 20% and now it is 19.5%. Repo rate, again it is 6.25% throughout the period. Reverse repo rate, again it is 6% throughout the period. Now here you have to note that repo rate and reverse repo rate, though as of June 15th and onwards appear to be at 6.25% and 6% respectively, they were at 6% and 5.75%. Because of the increased inflation in the recent RBI policy, they had to revise it upward by 25 basis points and indicating RBI's stance for the tight money conditions in the economy. As far as bank rate and marginal standing facility rate is concerned, again it is at 6.5%. You would find that savings deposits rates which have been deregulated, they are hovering around 3.5% to 4%. Call money rates are, while the savings deposits rates were hovering around 3.5% to 4% throughout the year, call money rates were steady at 6.07%. Treasury bill rates were again between 6.27% to 6.89%. And 10-year G-Sec paper, however, the rate of interest, the yield which was at 6.57% has gone up to 7.98%. So here you can imagine the impact of increase in the rate of interest on the value of securities that the banks are holding. With this background of the rates, we will just take note of certain key factors in management of investment portfolio. Trading profit, is it a profit or present value of future interest sacrificed? Here I am making a mention of the fact that whenever banks book trading profit, they assume that they have earned profit by selling securities. Have they really earned profit, or the profit that they have earned is future value of interest that they are sacrificing, or is it a present value of future interest that they are sacrificing? Mark my words. In case of investment, what should be our stance? Whether we should be focused on liquidity or we should be focused on profitability. While doing investment, capital adequacy ratio should be to the back of our mind or not. risk weights that are applicable to investments vis-a-vis the risk weights that are applicable to other class of assets, whether we should have in our mind or not. Whether we should use arbitrage strategies, buying in one market, selling in another market, take the advantage of differences in prices and book the profit. Can we transfer securities from one category to another category? If we can transfer, when we should transfer, why we should transfer? What are the rules that are there for valuation of securities? Why the investment fluctuation fund reserve is required to be created, and if the investment fluctuation fund is created out of trading profits, for what purposes I can make use of it? Can I transfer amount from investment fluctuation reserve again to my profit and loss account or not? While maintaining cash reserve ratio, can I take advantage of the policy prescription of average maintenance of 95% on a daily basis of the cash balances with Reserve Bank of India? Balances with banks in current account and fixed deposits. We are keeping funds with different types of banks. They are nationalized banks, they are scheduled commercial banks, private banks, and also cooperative banks. Now, while keeping such investments, are we making our investments judiciously? Are these investments helping me to generate profitability or to comply with CRR requirement or SLR requirement? So these considerations are there to the back of mind or not? And the balances that many banks maintain in current account with local branches of the correspondent banks, and those current accounts are maintained for the purposes of clearing balance, clearing settlement in the core banking scenario, whether it is advisable to maintain current account with each of these branches of the bank, or can I have only one single current account, and in that same current account each branch can deposit its funds? Those are the factors which we need to take note of in investment management. With this, I will first touch upon the functions of a treasury. In every bank, there are strategic business units. Deposit, retail banking is a strategic business unit. Retail banking is doing business of accepting deposits and doing retail lending. SME business unit, lending to small and medium enterprises, mid corporate borrowers. And third is treasury operations. In few of the cooperative banks which are of large size, having permissions from Reserve Bank of India, there is a fourth division, and that fourth division is the trade finance division. So, having talked about various business units, today we are discussing the functions of one of the business units, and that is treasury. So, if total of my deposits, total of my borrowings, total of my own funds are my total sources, those sources are deployed mainly into two class of assets. One is loans and advances, and second is investments. So the investment part is taken care of by treasury department of a bank, and that investment portfolio nowadays is as much as your advances portfolio. while the advances portfolio is managed by set of branches, regional offices and head office. Treasury department is a single office, and that single office is managing nearly 50% or less than 50% of the total funds of a bank. So from that perspective, we have to look at the functions of the treasury branch, the roles and responsibilities, and policies and strategies that we need to have in place so that our profitability is not impacted, reputation is not at stake, the very survival of the bank is not in problem. Number 1, the primary objective of any treasury is to meet CRR and SLR obligations. They have to ensure that they are maintaining cash reserve ratio on a continuous basis without any default as stipulated by Reserve Bank of India. And they are holding permitted government securities up to a given level, and thus they are complying with statutory liquidity ratio stipulated by Reserve Bank of India. While CRR is 4%, statutory liquidity ratio is 19.5%. In excess of 4%, if the banks keep funds with Reserve Bank of India in the form of CRR, or in excess of 19.5% if banks invest in government securities, it is permitted. But such excess investments can impact the profitability of the bank. So, what is that excess that we can keep has to be a decided policy by the bank, and accordingly they should keep certain excess amount in CRR, and same is the case with SLR. Second most important function is fund management, because I said the deposits of the bank are accepted by a bank with a primary obligation of making it available on demand. So whenever there is a demand for withdrawal from the depositor, that withdrawal demand has to be met without any qualification. And to meet that demand, bank has to keep the funds readily available either in the form of cash or in the form of bank balances, so that if there are withdrawals either from the branches or through checks, those withdrawals can be met with. Risk management. Here, when banks are investing the amount in government securities, when they are investing in commercial paper, when they are investing it in permitted mutual funds, debt related mutual funds, everywhere there is a risk involved. And if that risk is there, the risk has to be identified, it has to be measured, and it has to be mitigated. So from that perspective, risk management is one of the functions of treasury. Asset liability management. Now here, these are not different words. So for risk management itself, asset liability management is not a different word. But I said in my last session on market risk, I talked about the importance of the assets and their liabilities, their profile, the profile of liabilities, profile of assets. Certain of your liabilities are payable on demand, certain of the liabilities are payable at maturity after a particular period of time. But in all cases, there is a embedded option available to the depositor whereby he can ask for prepayment. And in case of loans and advances, you have also a risk of extension. And keeping those factors in mind continuously, you have to monitor your assets and liabilities. You can look at your balance sheet from various perspectives. One of the perspective is to prepare a structural liquidity statement. That structural liquidity statement provides you insights about the liquidity gaps, positive or negative. and the steps that are required to be taken so that the liquidity risk is mitigated, minimized or reduced to nil. Same is the case with a perspective when you look at asset liability from the interest rate sensitive perspective. There it is helping you to maintain your profitability. If your risk sensitive assets are more than the risk sensitive liabilities, and if the interest rates are rising, naturally the net interest margin would increase. But if it is otherwise, then you have to take the corrective steps. Now what are those corrective steps? It is true that you cannot change the balance sheet profile overnight, but at the same time, if there are available options to handle such situations, we have to take advantage of that. Managing net interest income, net interest margin and return on assets. Now net interest income, net interest margin and return on assets, these are the factors or the components which can have impact on your profitability. So from that perspective, Treasury has to keep a watch on the net interest income, if it is rising, falling or steady or stagnant. Same is the case with net interest margin. Last is monitoring the rating migrations. Reserve Bank has permitted banks to invest in commercial papers, but when they are investing it in commercial papers, naturally they have to invest in commercial papers having particular rating, AAA rating. So to ensure that their investments are in those AAA ratings, they continuously have to ensure the ratings of those corporates in whose commercial papers they have put in funds. So if there are any migrations, downward migrations, those ratings have to be taken note of, and accordingly the shifting has to be done. For the purposes of effectively carrying out the functions of Treasury, Reserve Bank of India wants all the banks to have an investment policy. That investment policy has to be drafted by the bank and it has to be approved by the board of directors. This policy has to be reviewed every year. So the policy along with its review has to be approved by the board of directors. Now in that policy, what are the objectives that the bank should cover? Number one, the first, as I said in the beginning, the functions of the Treasury, first is to comply with statutory policy obligations. So statutory policy obligations means what? Here, apart from taking note of CRR and SLR, if there are other statutory prescriptions by Reserve Bank of India for investments in government securities, non-SLR securities, those policy prescriptions have to be strictly adhered to. Second, they have to maintain the liquidity such that the profitability is also not affected and reputation is not put to stake. They have to ensure appropriate yield on investments, augment income, earn income by way of trading profits, and overall yield on investments, and comply with regulatory guidelines on SLR securities and non-SLR securities. Investment policy should define functions of front office, mid office, back office and define their roles. It should provide for the delegation of powers so that no opportunities are lost by any officer dealing in Treasury. Specify setting up of trading and investment committees and their functions. Spell out broad guidelines to cover the statutory requirements. Also, it lists out brokers and individual exposure to brokers. Set the stop loss limits for the dealers. Apart from the broad areas that investment policy should cover, it is essential that they should review the investment policy based on the performance of the bank in the previous year. And in that review, they should highlight if per transaction exposure limit with counterparty broker has been observed wherever necessary. Credit exposure compliance to individual or group of issuers, borrowers has been taken note of, has been duly complied with. That holding of shares of any company as pledgee, mortgage or absolute owner is in accordance with Banking Regulation Act. And investments in unlisted non-SLR securities does not exceed 10% of total investments as of 31st March of the previous year. And aggregate exposure under mutual funds is as prescribed by Reserve Bank of India. Now, I will talk about the actual operations at Treasury, and for that purpose at Treasury it is expected that Treasury functions are handled by three different segments. They are front office operations, back office operations and mid office operations. So these are the three separate categories with watertight compartments wherein one department cannot interact with another department, means they have to, but each department is supporting another department for furthering the goals set out in the investment policy. Front office operations, the team is involved in carrying out investment activities in accordance with the rules and regulations stipulated by Reserve Bank of India. They are involved in buying and selling of securities for taking advantage of fluctuations in the market and thereby generate trading profit. They are investing the funds available in different permitted investment avenues. They are investing funds for the purpose of complying with CRR and SLR requirements. They are analyzing or tracking the developments in the domestic and international markets. And they are also participating in trading and investment committee meetings and maintaining the requisite records that are required to be maintained at a front office. Mid office operations, they are continuously analyzing the portfolio. While analyzing the portfolio, they are using all the tools available, statistical tools available such as value at risk, value of equity, simulation analysis, stress testing, income yield, and they are valuing the portfolio, valuation of portfolio based on the valuation norms provided by Reserve Bank of India, generating MIS to assess the risks that are there in the investment portfolio, do the performance analysis on a periodic basis and report it to the higher ups, report any deviations in the prudential limits or the limits that are specified in the investment policy of the banks, ensure that counterparty limits for the brokers are not violated, and credit rating of non-SLR portfolios are tracked. These are the duties at the mid office levels. In the back office, they have to ensure that settlement of deals within the stipulated time, negotiated dealing system for government securities and as per the settlement procedures for other securities, checking of deals settled on NDS-OM and CBLO, maintenance of records for purposes of audit and accounts, ensuring that the CRR balances are continuously maintained in excess of 95% so that CRR requirement is met with. Funds are continuously maintained in accounts with Reserve Bank of India for meeting the liabilities that might come from various channels such as RTGS, NEFT, clearing settlement, Aadhaar enabled payments and the cash withdrawals. Carry out accounting entries, keep the records of all the transactions for the purposes of audit compliance. Now, what is this trading committee that does? Now, this trading committee meets on a daily basis at Treasury. This trading committee is of the dealers, means the participants who are taking care of front office operations, and the head of Treasury and other top functionaries at the treasury department, they are the members of the trading committee. That trading committee meets on a daily basis. They evaluate the developments that have happened at a macro level in the economy, and by taking advantage of that, they can define, realign their strategies of investments on a short-term basis for a given day. So they can manage portfolio both short-term and long-term, take the decisions in participation of treasury bills or government papers that are being launched, and such other book building processes that are in vogue. They have to take advantage of it. They have to take the decisions whether to participate in such bids or not. That is the job of these functions of the trading committee. Investment committee is overviewing the performance of the trading committee. So they are ratifying the actions of the trading committee. They are giving guidance to the trading committee. Investment committee, unlike trading committee, meets at periodic intervals, say a fortnight or a month, and there the decisions of the trading committee are reviewed, the strategies are reviewed, and the necessary guidance is provided by the investment committee. Now, eligible counterparties. Now here I will just touch upon these eligible counterparties. In fact, we would be dealing it in detail when we would be talking about different products, but you would just to appreciate who are the participants in the investment market, I have just highlighted the eligible counterparties for each of these segments. For government securities, like banks, all the scheduled commercial banks, all the cooperative banks, mutual funds, pension funds, insurance companies, and Clearing Corporation of India, they can be counterparties. For non-SLR deals, here take note, only scheduled commercial banks and primary dealers are allowed. And for certificate of deposit, again, scheduled commercial banks, primary dealers, all financial institutions, scheduled commercial cooperative banks, insurance companies, mutual funds, and provident funds and pension funds. Now I will touch upon investment portfolio and its classification. Usually the investment portfolio is to be classified into three categories. One is held to maturity, second is available for sale, and third is held for trading. Now here you would understand this classification indicates the intention of the treasury people, for what purpose they are doing a investment. Held to maturity represents a security which the treasury person or the bank wants to hold it till the date of maturity. Available for sale, held for trading. Before I talk about available for sale, I will first talk about held for trading. Here the investment objective is very short term. Bank already holds investment in government securities for meeting SLR purpose, and they want to do trading in investments for the purposes of generating profit by taking advantage of volatility in prices. So available for trading, here I am holding securities which I am likely to sell within a fortnight, within a day, within a overnight I am going to sell. So those are the securities which are held for trading. If I do not sell the securities because of the changes in the market and because the price is not as per my expectation, and in such cases if the security remains in that category, then after 1 month compulsorily I have to transfer that security into another category called available for sale. So held for trading, available for sale, and held to maturity, these are the three categories in which your investment portfolio has to be classified. Now here this classification has different connotations, particularly from the point of view of valuation, and hence this classification is very important. Now here you would find that investments included under held to maturity category should not exceed 25% of the bank's total investment except in the following cases. The excess comprises only of SLR securities. Means if you are holding it in held to maturity category, if all the securities are SLR securities, then those can be held even in excess of 25% of your total portfolio. So in excess of 19.5%, if you are holding the securities, all those securities should be permitted securities or permitted government securities or the SLR securities. Now, when the shifting of investment from one category to another category is permitted, and what are the rules? So, shifting of investments to and from HTM category is allowed once in a year at the beginning of the accounting year. So, at the beginning of the financial year, banks are allowed to transfer the securities which are held in HTM category to available for sale category or held to trading category. Now, this can be done only once in a year. Now, why banks should do it? Because if those are the securities which are in excess of your SLR requirement, and if bank wants to sell those securities for taking advantage of favorable price, then in such case banks can transfer those securities from HTM category to available for sale category. Shifting of investments from AFS category to HFT category, means held for trading category, is permitted with the approval of their board of directors and chief executive of the bank. Shifting of investments from held for trading category to AFS category is also permitted, but it is only in exceptional circumstances, subject to depreciation. What it means here, when you are transferring it from held for trading to available for sale, you have to calculate the market value of the securities, compare it with your purchase price. If purchase price is more than the market value, then the difference has to be accounted for as a depreciation, and then you can transfer it from held for trading to available for sale categories. Transfer of scrips from one category to another under all circumstances should be done at the acquisition cost, book value, market value on the date of transfer, whichever is the least, and depreciation, if any, on such transfer should be fully provided for. So when I am transferring it from held for trading to HTM category, to available for sale category, the depreciation has to be accounted for. Now, valuation of securities. The individual scrip in available for sale and held for trading category should be marked to market. Means at the end of the year, usually banks nowadays at the end of the quarter, they value the securities, they compare the market value of the security vis-a-vis the purchase price, the difference between the two. If there is a appreciation, they are not allowed to book the profit, but if there is a depreciation, that depreciation has to be accounted for. Investment classified under HTM category, they need not be marked to market. Means when you are holding the securities till maturity, if you have purchased a security over and above its face value, then that face value you can amortize over a period of that security. That amortization on a yearly basis can be done. So at the time of transferring that security to HTM category, you need not book any depreciation that is there in respect of transfer of securities to HTM category. Well, securities under available for sale and held for trading categories should be valued scrip wise, and depreciation appreciation should be aggregated for each classification. Now this is most important. Your security portfolio is grouped into categories. They are called government securities, other approved securities, shares, bonds of public sector undertakings, others, and separately. Now here, if in each of these segments you are holding securities, in one segment there is appreciation, in another segment there is a depreciation, you cannot net it out. If there is a appreciation, ignore it, but if there is a depreciation, fully provide for it. The valuation has to be done strictly as per the valuation methodology as laid down by Reserve Bank of India, and usually the prices are provided by FIMDA, Fixed Income, Money Market and Derivatives Association of India. The present valuation methodology of RBI FIMDA for various instruments is summed up as below. Central government securities should be valued based on prices published by FIMDA. Means whatever prices are published on a daily basis by FIMDA, based on that you have to value the value of securities. Central government securities which do not qualify for SLR, state government securities as well as other SLR bonds should be valued after adding 25 basis points to the base yield curve. Means whatever is the yield rate that is given in FIMDA, you have to add 25 basis points, and at that rate excess SLR investments, state government securities and other SLR bonds have to be valued. Treasury bills, certificate of deposits and commercial papers should be valued at carrying cost. Here there is no market price declared by any authority, and hence at whatever price you have purchased, that is the price at which you should value those securities, that is treasury bills, certificate of deposits and commercial papers. Now here take note of this. Treasury bills, certificate of deposits and commercial papers, these are the short term investments, and if you are putting funds in short term investments, then it is advisable to put the funds in these securities, because here they are not marked to market. At whatever price you have purchased, at that same price you can carry it in your books. But if you are purchasing it in government securities and if you are holding it for short period, then in such cases if there is a depreciation, that depreciation has to be provided for. So while doing the investment, this is one of the major advantage that the banks can take note of. Non-SLR bonds should be valued by adding the corresponding credit spreads to the annualized base yield curve as published by FIMDA. Units of mutual funds are again valued at the net asset value declared. Now what are the internal controls that the banks should have in the treasury operations? I said, for taking advantage of volatility in the market, treasury front office is involved in buying and selling of securities. By doing trading, they are generating profit. But there are always cases that in each and every transaction you would not be in a position to book profit, and hence it is required to define the stop loss limit, so that if a particular level of loss is reached, you should square off that transaction and get out of it. Otherwise your loss would increase. Money market stop loss should be for AFS and HFT category. Internal credit rating method should be defined to help in taking decisions regarding commercial paper and bond purchase. Now usually in case of bonds and commercial papers, the external rating agencies are doing the rating of those companies. So in addition to that rating, you can use your internal rating to get additional satisfaction before investing in such commercial papers or bonds. Industry-wise sub-limits can be enforced for a non-SLR investments. What is this industry-wise limits? Now here you cannot put all your investment in commercial papers, say only from one particular industry, say automobile industry or information and technology industry or any other such industry. You have to ensure that a sub-limit is defined for each of these industries, and accordingly your investment of non-SLR nature is put into these various categories. Guidelines such as assets under management for mutual fund should be defined, and SLR investment and state securities. Internal limit for non-SLR investments for bonds, commercial papers, and debt funds should also be defined in addition to the limits stipulated by Reserve Bank of India. In case of liquid debt funds and income oriented debt funds, investment in liquid short-term schemes and income schemes should be defined. The investments in units of mutual funds can be done either directly or by availing the services of authorized mutual fund distributors. Certain additional controls you can have. One is diversification. Your entire investment portfolio should be fully diversified. That diversification should be by taking note of the issuer, industry, geography. So issuer wise there should be diversification, geography wise diversification, industry wise diversification. As far as maturities are concerned, you have to see that your securities are not either means they are not in a particular maturity bucket only. They should be across different maturity buckets so that the volatility in the price is not affecting all your investment portfolio. Liquidity buffer, the portfolio will be built up as per the broad ALM objectives of the bank, which are laid down in ALM policy. Maintenance up to certain percentage of total deposits, say 0.5% or 1% as a liquidity buffer, which may be placed in short-term assets such as treasury bills, forex swaps, repo transactions, lending under CBLO, lending in call money markets, and short-term mutual funds. Means here to have a liquidity, you can keep certain funds in such immediately liquid funds like treasury bills, forex swaps. I have two questions with me. How should banks strike a balance between liquidity and profitability? Now, based on the risk appetite, we should have our policies for liquidity and profitability. If the bank is of smaller size, the more stress has to be on liquidity and less on profitability. But when we are giving less stress on profitability and more on liquidity, bank also has to carry out a behavioral analysis based on 1 year data, 6 months data or 3 months data, and accordingly go on moderating their policies so that they can balance between the liquidity as well as profitability. Now here there cannot be a straitjacket mathematical formula which banks can opt for, but based on their experiences they have to devise a optimum balance between the liquidity and profitability. What are the favorable investment options given that some tools like bonds are risky? Two favorable options are available for the purposes of investment on a short term basis. One is treasury bills. Here when you are investing in treasury bills, the treasury bills of 91 days, 182 days and 364 days are available. Those treasury bills need not be marked to market. They are to be carried at carrying cost and hence you do not have to provide for depreciation. The yield from the treasury bills is more or less comparable with your 10-year dated security. Second, on the non-SLR front, investments in debt related mutual funds can be another option for which banks should go for it. But when they are going for debt related investment in mutual fund, they again have to check the orientation of that mutual fund, whether it is for generating income or for providing the liquidity, and accordingly they have to do the investments. They can balance it by holding it in both the class of mutual funds. Before I conclude, I would again say that treasury function, what I discussed herein before, is for banks of size having total deposits and advances about 1000 crore or so. But this does not mean that for smaller banks, investment is a residual function. Investment is as much important as your advances as long as your 50% of the funds are in investments. If for 50% of your advances you have risk management in place, you have due diligence in place, you have strategies and policies defined by the board of directors, then for the investment purpose also you can take learnings from the insights that I have provided. Thank you. Initially, like all other banks, we had branch automation in place. So when we did branch automation, it was automation of the manual processes. But when we migrated from branch automation to core banking solution, there we realized that core banking, here we are not only automating our operations, but we are adopting the best practices and policies which are being followed by other successful banks. And if we have to take advantage of that, we have to revisit our practices and processes, and for that purpose in our bank we carried out a business process re-engineering exercise. In that business process re-engineering exercise, we decided to make branch as a retail outlet providing only services to the customers with a focus on a customer, shifting all the back office operations from the branches to the centralized places. So, account opening was one of such activities. KYC, as you are aware, has become so much of importance that KYC non-compliance even at 1% level is punishable by Reserve Bank of India. This particular decision of doing a BPR exercise has helped my bank substantially.